Kids are kids everywhere. Children are children. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter. I've been to different continents now, different countries, different cultures. We'll come to that term in a second. Children are children. They want to play, they express their emotions, and they don't discriminate. Adults discriminate. As a foreigner, wherever I go, I feel discriminated from the adults. Now, the word discriminate just means singled out. Doesn't mean it's bad or good. Some people have discriminated me in a very positive way because I'm a foreigner, so they're really nice and helpful. That's a discriminatory action, right? Oh, you're a foreigner, so I'm going to treat you differently. So discrimination doesn't mean it's necessarily like, oh, it's a bad thing, right? And I've been discriminated in a negative way also. You're a foreigner. We don't really like you. We don't really like your kind for whatever reason. Children, anytime I was around children, let's say between the age of 2 to 10, 12, just before adolescence, I felt like I was just another person from their point of view. Like, you see this a lot, in playgrounds where there is, let's say, people of different colors and backgrounds. You see the kids are playing and they have no idea that, you're different than me because of culture, right? So this is where I want to come to here. I'm going to quote Terence McKenna: culture is not your friend. So children, I mean, maybe up to 12 is a little too much because by then you're already brainwashed by your culture and by the software, the program of your culture, wherever that happens to be. So culture is not your friend. Children are pre-culture. So they're just the expression of the Tao, the expression of God, before the perversion of the cultural programming is installed. So you come in here and you're expressing God in a certain way, and then culture comes in, and then it starts to brainwash you. I mean, it happens the minute you're here, the minute you're born. It happens, and in fact, it happens before because you carry certain DNA, in which is information. DNA is information, so you carry certain information inside you here that's based on, let's say, the cultural brainwashing of the last few thousand years. Nevertheless, still, children in their early development are not as brainwashed. It's happening, slowly. So you go, and I teach kids, right? I teach Chinese children, and the younger they are, the more free in their expression they seem to be. They just seem to be who they are. The older they get, the more you could see that the cultural brainwashing is taking over. So their manners and their speech and the way they express themselves starts to conform to their culture, whereas the younger children, like not yesterday, the day before, I taught this little girl. Her name is Cece. She's 6 years old. I mean, every time I teach her, I get a big smile on my face because she's just like, she's 6, and it's just pure expression of the Tao, just pure expression of God. It's not restricted by the way she should behave according to her culture. She should speak to the teacher, etc. The older kids, you'll see, they feel like, I gotta talk. It's a teacher. It's a superior. I gotta talk to the teacher in a certain way. The younger kids, often, they just call me by my first name. They don't care that I'm a teacher. They don't feel like, oh, he's a teacher, so he's my superior, so I gotta speak to him in a certain way, just the way they are. And then because when you're the way you are, you have so much energy, because it's unrestricted. The water can go on with no dams. But then culture starts to build dams, so you have to restrict your expression, and then you have to conform to the culture, the particular culture that you're in, and how your family raised you to behave, etc. And so you build dams that restrict the flow of the water, which is you, the flow of the Tao. And then you get rigid, robotic adults as a result. I take a sip here of this freshly squeezed orange juice. This video is sponsored by freshly squeezed orange juice. Okay. So, children are pre-cultural programming. And so they can teach us a lot. They're not by any means perfect. If you look at Joe Campbell's hero's journey, the hero ends up becoming a child again, starts out as a child, goes through all the hero goes through, and then ends up back as a child. That's the last stage of the hero's journey. However, that child has gained the wisdom of the world. So it's not a naive child. Children are naive, right? You could dangle candy and tell a child, hey, come here, I'm gonna give you candy, and then it happens all the time. You could kidnap them. They're naive. They're too trusting in this really dark world that we're in. So they're naive, but they can teach you how to be, and then your development into adulthood and beyond is to gain wisdom in the world and then come back and become a child again. Jesus says, thou shall not enter the kingdom of heaven until you become that trusting child. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, so there it is. I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. This is what Jesus was saying. He was saying that if you do not become that child again, that fully expressive pre-cultural programming child, just an expression of God, a vibrant, joyful, energetic, expressive, unrestricted being, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven, because you always feel like, how should I behave? You're inside your head. You're not experiencing life. You're inside your head. You're abiding by someone else's rules, which are really garbage. Culture is garbage. All right, I'm just going to say it straight out. I'm a little bit extreme with this. Terence McKenna wants to. And I just feel like culture is garbage. Like all culture is just garbage ultimately. Yeah, there's music. I mean, I'm starting to, the older I get, the more I'm liking instrumental music, because instrumental music in many ways, like classical music and flute, in many ways, it's also pre-culture. Because the minute, the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. The minute you put words into songs, then, you're putting in your culture in it. And it's not a bad thing. I listen to music with words all the time. I'm just saying, even in the realm, because we usually associate, say, culture with music, right? Like, Arabic music, Chinese music, etc., right? Well, actually, even music itself has its own degrees, right? And of purity. And if you want to get to the purest music, you go to music like Bach and Beethoven and beautiful flute. And you'll see that it's kind of words. It's just music. It's just using universal laws. Like music is all mathematical, and it's according to the laws of creation. So even music itself, we associate it with culture, but really, when you get to the purest expression of music, then you see that it's also just universal. So there is, I like to get always to the universal laws and the basic core things that unite us all. And so culture separates, right? Language separates. Language, just try and travel around and go to a country that does not speak your language. You will feel, no matter how nice you are and how kind you are, and no matter how much you try your best to communicate and say a few words and be really nice and gentle, you will notice that you're alienated from that other culture. If you don't speak their language, and if they don't speak your language, it's different if they can speak a little bit in your language, and but it's a general sense of alienation. When I was in Thailand and I was in Pai and I was in this beautiful resort, I loved the people that worked there. They were Thai, they only spoke Thai, but we had this very genuine, positive. Every time I saw them, Sawadee Kap, very, very positive. But it was just that. It couldn't be taken any further. So there was still that sense of alienation between us, which is, we both recognize the light in one another. So that's why we're always smiling and, like greeting one another. But unfortunately, we cannot really take this relationship anywhere beyond because we speak different languages. Because we come from different cultures. You see? So language is just one of those things. Children, of course, can communicate better without language, but as they grow older and as they get brainwashed into the whole package of culture, which includes language, media, popular culture, etc., then they become more and more alienated from anybody that does not belong and conform and become a product of that culture. You see? So, for instance, like you have the consumerist culture in the United States and in Canada and North America. And if you don't belong to the consumerist culture, if let's say everybody around you is a consumer and they're always consuming and they're always like looking at the latest trends, buying the latest couch, buying the latest this, and if you don't conform, if let's say you work in an office job and everybody around you is a product of that consumerist culture and you're not, you're going to be alienated from them pretty soon. So kids, I really learn a lot from kids, and because I'm surrounded by children. I teach children almost every day. I teach them English, and I'm a very observant person. So whenever I go, I'm observing what's around me. Like if I go to a garden or something here, currently in Tbilisi, Georgia, and I just observe and I just see that I'm looking at the children and I'm looking at just the way they're behaving, and I'm like, yeah, that they still have not yet been fully brainwashed. They're in the process, and I can see the expression of the Tao, the purity of the Tao, and that's why kids have more energy, because their expression is unrestricted. They don't feel like they've got to hold back their tears, their laughter, their disappointment. But again, they're naive. I'm not pointing children as the example to follow. They're naive. They can easily be fueled because they haven't gained the wisdom to realize, oh, the world is currently in a certain way, so I can't be over trusting. I can't, I gotta realize there's some evil here, and etc. But Jesus even says, unless you become that trusting child, you're not gonna enter the kingdom of heaven. So there's the distinction is that as you gain the wisdom of the world and you go on the hero's journey, you become trusting, but not from a naive point of view, from the point of view of understanding that if I am a trusting person, yet discerning, then good things will happen to you. If you trust the universe trusts you, and then good things will happen to you. But there is also discernment. There's a saying, a Sufi saying, trust in Allah, which is, God. Trust in Allah, but tie your camel. And that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you here. So the trust in Allah part is the being a child-like. And then tying your camel is the discernment of the adult, of recognizing, okay, this world, the way it is right now, there's a lot of evil here. So children can be great teachers. If you have children yourself, look at them as your teachers, actually. I look at my children that I teach as my teachers. I really do. And I'm always intrigued by children. I'm always just genuinely intrigued. Like when I started teaching, this was a year ago, more than a year and a bit. I was microdosing at the time, so I was taking a lot, like more than a microdose, just to get in the flow of the job, right? Because I was just starting it at, teaching kids online. And I take LSD, I take like not a microdose, like a mid dose kind of thing, like 1/3, sometimes half a tab, and I teach. And I was so fascinated by the way the brain of a child, as I'm teaching them, I'm looking, especially the younger ones, I was so intrigued. How does your brain work? Because when under the influence of these substances, I become that child again. It's so funny that I become that child. So I was so intrigued. I'm like, how does your brain work? Because we were all children at some point, right? Their brain works differently than adults. Yeah, so it gets fragmented and fragmented and fragmented the older you get due to the cultural programming. If that cultural programming wasn't taking place, the adult would turn out to be completely different, right? So it's not that well, that's the story of humanity, is you as a child you're free and energetic, and you grow older and you become this rigid adult. No, that's not the story of humanity. That's the story of humanity as it is being written right now by the gatekeepers of the matrix. So anyway, the moral of the story is, look at children as teachers. On your hero's journey, you do come back to become a child again, but a discerning, wise child. So essentially, to be living in the kingdom of heaven, you ought to be that child. You ought to have so much energy. You ought to express yourself as you are. You ought to get out of all these cultural prisons, but wise enough not to be fooled by the evildoers in this world. Thank you to the patrons. Thank you to the people who continuously support this channel. I love you guys. I have links in the description if you want to contribute. $2 a month on Patreon, or just a one-time donation. Mwah. Love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.